This is the farmhouse where I grew up, where my father grew up, where my grandfather grew up, where my great-grandfather grew up. The main house was built in 1860. We got electricity in 1943 with the Rural Electrification Act. And now what I am doing is I'm removing the majority of the 1960 updates and reverting the era back to somewhere between 1920 and 1950. I'm going to show you each room in the order that I did them years ago. While I am no more of a carpenter or a designer than any member of my family has ever been, I'm doing it to suit me and my tastes. Well, we started filling up the pantry by looking at some of the metal cabinetry that we had. Some of it was mid to late 60s, and it was the thin stuff that isn't much good, but we did have this one cabinet that was late 50s, early 60s. It was built very well, so we decided to rebuild it. The outside is Benjamin Moore Aura Spanish Red. The inside is Valspar linen napkin. And here you can see where we took a piece of Luan plywood and glued it to the bottom of the cabinet because we didn't want, if there was any water on the floor, we didn't want the metal cabinet rusting to the battleship linoleum that was on the floor. And that Luan plywood was just painted any color that we happened to have, and that was just a green, just something to protect the wood. And of the same vintage and manufacture, the upper cabinet was white, and we painted that the same as the lower cabinet. This cabinet is kind of special that the glass doors slide, and they're set at an angle, and it's kind of a wavy glass. You don't see stuff like that anymore. We wanted a very deep slop sink, and we really wanted one in a cast iron, but we couldn't find one. So we got this one made by Swanstone. It's their 17-gallon deep sink, and it's in gray granite, and it's the material that you normally see on countertops. So it's a very tough material. And as you can see here, we just set it up against the cabinet to get an idea of how it was going to look and whether it would fit. And here it is from another angle. You can see we just used a roller to hold it up, and it looked like it was going to work. Ignore the faucets and drain in the wall there because that was where the washer used to be. Now the blue painter's tape, that delineates where the countertop is going to end. And you can see those faucets just couldn't be there. And then just like we had in past episodes, we laid down the 3/4 plywood, and then we're going to skin it in stainless steel. And then we cut the hole in the plywood and dropped in the sink. And here it is from another angle, and as you can see, it's going to fit quite nicely. And then in keeping with the age of the house, I thought we'd do something a little different for the faucet. So we're going to use that hand pump, but we're going to run a hose up through the inside of it to shoot the pressurized water out the spout. And unless you really knew that that was a pressurized spout, you would think you would have to pump the handle to get water. And then we wanted old-fashioned turned legs for the support for the sink, but we found we couldn't find legs that were the right height, so we decided to make them. And here you can see we've got the center marked and drilled, and you take that double-headed screw one end in and screw the other end into another piece of leg, creating a longer leg. And when it's glued and screwed tight together, this is what you get. And with a little sanding and with the leg installed, it looks just like it was a one-piece unit. And here's a look from the end showing both legs. Because we wanted space under that sink, and the sink is so deep, being 17 gallons, we decided to put the drain trap on the other side of the wall in the stairwell going down cellar. Because in reality, it doesn't matter where you have your trap as long as you have one. Here I am assembling the 1x4 backsplash. I didn't have a long enough piece, so I am gluing and pocket screwing two pieces together to get the length I need. And here I'm gluing and pocket screwing the backsplash to the 3/4 plywood. And with it flipped over, now the wood is ready to be skinned in stainless steel. Now here is where we started getting a little trick. The end piece that's going to connect the two legs, we have got the pocket screws in, but you also see there's 3 holes. Now pay attention, because this is kind of a trick that we came up with. So you glue and pocket screw that end piece into the legs, and what you end up with is the look of mortise and tenon without the mortise and tenon. And if you're curious what the 3 holes are for, you'll find out shortly. Then the 2 legs and the end piece were pocket screwed into the wall to hold it in position. And as you can see, we painted the assembly the gray, what we call the mud, the gray-green. And you can now understand why the holes were there, because we're putting a faucet assembly that is from a hair salon. You've got a hot and a cold, and on the back side is a spigot where the hose goes to for the hair washing wand, except we're going to use that hose to feed up to the hand pump. Now here's a picture on the back side. You've got the hot and cold quick disconnect for the PEX, and you've got the stainless, the braided stainless hose that will go up to the hand pump. Then we took the wood assembly into the shop and had it skinned in stainless steel. And about this time, you'll notice under the wall cabinet, we've got electrical outlets. And then we drilled a couple holes in the wall, ran the hot and cold PEX through, and snapped it into the quick disconnects of the faucet. And with a bead of silicone run around the rim, we dropped in the sink and secured it. And then I proceeded to, with a hole saw, drill into the stainless and the wood to mount the hand pump. Now the way we pressurized that hand pump is we took a plastic fitting that would screw into the bottom of the hand pump where the iron pipe would normally go. Then we put a barbed fitting and a piece of reinforced plastic and ran that up through to the nozzle. Then that assembly was screwed into the bottom of the pump, and then a fitting was screwed onto that so that your stainless line would screw on, so that water would then flow up through and out the spout. And then with the hose positioned correctly in the spout, we put silicone around the outside and let that harden. And then we turned on the water and checked the flow of the water coming out the spout. And what we determined was it didn't look like the water that normally comes out of a hand pump. So it was back to the silicone tube and recontour the inside until we got the flow coming out of the spout that looked like water coming out of a hand pump. And if you don't know what that looks like, if you've ever run a hand pump, you'd see that the water doesn't come out like a normal faucet. It comes out as kind of a horseshoe, and that's what I was shooting for. And after we got the flow of the water looking correct, I painted the pump with Rust-Oleum Gloss Hunter Green with a brush. And then I dug up a pair of iron square-headed bolts that were of the right vintage and mounted the pump permanently to the sink. And here is a shot of the finished product with the hidden controls, so that when you approach the sink, if you don't know that it's under the lip of the tabletop, you would swear you have to use the hand pump to get water. And then I got looking at that cabinet and I decided I didn't like the idea of that giant space without a shelf, so I ordered up a shelf kit online and cut it to size and installed it. And here it is with the drawer all the way out, so it makes it easy to put stuff in, and it doubles the storage capacity of that cabinet. And that is how we did the cabinet and slop sink.